In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, God is one. Amen. Well, we woke up to a beautiful morning this morning here. Beautiful sunshine, beautiful dew all over the grass. Beautiful in every way, actually, really lovely. One of those great spring days. Daffodils are going over now, but they're being replaced by the tulips. Now, I always say that by the time the tulips arrive, I'm sick of spring flowers. I'm looking forward to roses and things like that. It's not quite true. Over the years, I've become more fond of tulips. They do, for me, arrive a little bit too late. And they're so temperamental, of course. They tend to sort of rot in the ground. So you plant a lot of different types of tulips, and only one or two will survive the year and come up again the next time. Or alternatively, you have to dig the whole shooting match up, dry them, store them, and replant them in the autumn, which is a nuisance. Anyway, there we are. There are lots more things to worry about in this world than tulips, to say the least at the moment. People are turning up. I can see there's Helia there. Good morning. Your prayers, God bless you. Miss Connie, you're, of course, good evening. And, of course, you are entering into autumn. I guess you must be in, well, what would be now? Sort of the equivalent of our October. Days of mellow fruitfulness. Very nice. Ben, good morning. That's Athanasius, to all those that don't know. Nice to see that at 10 o'clock in the morning. What? Ben? What? You're awake? Miss Connie has not had much luck with tulips. No, I don't think anybody really has much luck with them. They are subject to all sorts of pests and diseases. Out here, we planted a lot at one point. Most of them have died off, just leaving some rather orangey looking ones behind. And they won't last very long. They're very pretty, but they won't last very long. And meanwhile, all the roses out there are beginning to come up nicely. So that is very good. Good morning, Anton. Happy Tuesday to you as well. Last the summer harvests. Yep. Ben is going go-karting. You scallywag. Anyway, not to worry. Could be worse, I guess, Ben. You could. I rather like the idea of going go-karting. That sounds fun. Right. It's a little bit dark in here today because for some peculiar reason, the lights won't come on. I don't know why not. We need to replace all the... We've got those old-fashioned strip lights, you know, the sort of thing. What are they called? Neon lights, fluorescent lights. And they don't really work terribly well. One thing after another goes wrong with them, either the fitting or the light itself or the starter motors and all the rest of it. They break down, and they flash on and off and so on. Anyway, there we go. Today, what are we going to be doing? We're looking at a new chapter, verses 1 through 9 of chapter 24, which is where St. Paul is standing trial before Governor Felix. Here we go. Now, after 5 days, Ananias, the high priest, came down with the elders and a certain orator named Tertullus. These gave evidence to the governor against Paul. And when he was called upon, Tertullus began his accusation, saying, "Seeing that through you we enjoy great peace and prosperity is being brought to this nation by your foresight, we accept it always in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness. Nevertheless, not to be tedious to you any further, I beg you to hear by your courtesy a few words from us. For we have found this man a plague, a creator of dissension among the Jews throughout all the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He even tried to profane the temple, and we seized him and wanted to judge him according to our law. But the commander Lysias came by with great violence, took him out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come to you. By examining him yourself, you may ascertain all these things of which we accuse him. And the Jews also assented, maintaining that these things were so. Well, there we go. He's going to have a hard time persuading the Romans. In fact, he doesn't, of course, but there we go. Okay, verse 1. Now, after 5 days, Ananias the high priest came down with the elders and a certain orator named Tertullus. These gave evidence to the governor against Paul. So Paul, as you'll remember, has been sent to Caesarea by Lysias because he's frightened that the Jews are going to carry on making a big fuss while he's in charge of Jerusalem. And the Romans, they liked what they call peace. And their peace was a strange sort of peace from our point of view. It was the sort of peace that comes after everybody has been slaughtered and finally there's nobody to rise up against you. Essentially, they didn't want any dissension. And they'd use their military might and their power to make sure that any sort of dissension was put down. So when eventually the Jews rose up against the Romans, they were fought against until they were utterly vanquished, put to the sword. Millions, well, many, hundreds of thousands were crucified, others taken away into slavery. And then the Romans declared that they had won the peace. They had peace in front of them. Not the sort of war that we go for generally nowadays, although there are some examples in the world at the moment where that seems to be happening. We call it now genocide. And that is really what the Romans, you could choose. You could either welcome the Romans in, or they'd fight you until you were all gone. Alexander the Great, as they say in Asia, the great Satan, had this exact same attitude to war. People either capitulated straight away, or else he slaughtered them completely. So Lysias has taken away Paul so that he doesn't need to do something like this, because the Jewish elders and others are getting out of hand. Now, 5 days later, they send down a high-profile delegation. It's no mean delegation, this one, headed by the high priest, who is the chief amongst all the Jews. They might have a king, but the king himself was a puppet king, but this person was somebody rather who ruled the Jews on behalf of the Jews. Despite the fact that by then the high priesthood was being bought and sold by people, and they had different governors who put in a different high priest. This particular high priest was one of the successors of the high priest Jonathan, whom Felix had actually murdered. So this was a man who was definitely on Felix's side and probably felt that Felix would come to his aid. Okay, so Ananias as a person, he was cruel, violent, very corrupt, and he himself was murdered eventually, but he was high priest from AD 47 through to AD 59, which is quite a long time for those days to go about not getting murdered, assassinated. He was assassinated by a group of people who themselves were rebellious against the Romans, and they saw him as someone who was a quisling, somebody who was on the side of the Romans. Okay, they brought along the elders as well. So these are senior members of the Sanhedrin. all of whom would have been Sadducees. The Pharisees have been left behind because they find no fault in St. Paul. And they also bring along with them somebody here who's described as an orator, Tertullus. Now, the word orator, rhetorician in Greek, this is someone who is going to speak on their behalf, who has learned the case against St. Paul and is good at putting it over. What nowadays we would call a barrister. So they brought their own barrister with them, a type of lawyer, a barrister. Okay? I'm not sure whether in America they have barristers, but certainly in Commonwealth countries they do. So somebody speaking on behalf of their clients, an orator, a barrister. Okay? And what are they doing? They are going to bring evidence to the governor against St. Paul. Now, this is a technical word in the Greek, and it means formal charges. So the formal charges at last are going to be made against St. Paul. And it has to be said, these formal charges are very weak, very, very weak indeed. Okay, verse 2. And when he was called upon, Tertullus began his accusation, saying, seeing that through you we enjoy great peace and prosperity is being brought to this nation by your foresight, verse 3, we accept it always and in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness. Tertullus lays on the charm thick. We actually know that Felix was corrupt, cruel. He mismanaged his governorship. He took huge numbers of bribes. He lined his own pockets with the finances from the place. He was promoted way above his abilities, and he was a murderer. You can read all about it in Josephus chapter 20, verses 162 to 179. And in case you're wondering how on earth you can find that, I have kindly put a link to it underneath this video, which even now, if you scroll down, you can see. And instead of listening to me prattling on here, you can click on that and enjoy a good read from Josephus, who, if nothing else, is a very good storyteller. A lot of what he says is very skewed. He skews it over so that the Romans won't crucify him. Josephus himself, as you probably know, as well as being a rather rotten historian, because he was definitely one-sided, he himself escaped from Jerusalem during the Jewish wars, where the Jews rose up against the Romans. He was on the side of the Jews to begin with, until he saw there was a good chance that they would lose, at which point he managed to find a tunnel and broke out through the tunnel and then joined the Roman side against the Jews. But if he hadn't done that, we'd have lost out on some very good stories. If you've never read the Jewish histories by Josephus, himself a Jew, then really this would be a very good way for Miss Connie to spend the rest of the evening and for everybody else to pencil into their diary at some point in the near future where you might sit with numerous coffees or cups of tea and enjoy it for yourself. Good morning, Irina, and good morning, Nicoletta, too. Okay, so there we go. So much for Josephus. You can read all about it there. Okay. Verse 3, which we said, we accept it always in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness. What do they accept? That prosperity has been brought to this nation. It actually is the orthomaton, which means orthodox measures or great measures. In other words, reforms, he's bringing about reforms to the area, and they're saying, and these are bringing great prosperity to us. You might not be surprised to discover this is the only place in literature where it says that Felix is doing anything good. He carries on, verse 4. Nevertheless, not to be tedious to you any further, I beg you to hear by your courtesy a few words from us. His flattery continues. I don't want to bore you, he says, but, okay, of your kindness, hear us out. And now come the charges, and they're worth listening to. Because this is a matter of life and death, as far as St. Paul is concerned. At the end of this, he might expect there'd be one of two outcomes. Outcome number one is that he is condemned to death. Romans, by and large, do not put people in prison. Rather like in this country, in the 16th and 17th century, prisons were just holding places. If you were a debtor, you might be sent to prison till you paid your debt, but everybody else put in prison was there to be hanged. That's some later date, shortly afterwards, 21 days later. And in Roman times, they saw no purpose in feeding anybody if they were condemned to death. They took them out and killed them off straight away. Okay, St. Paul would not be crucified, of course, because he was a Roman citizen, but they'd simply lop off his head, as they did eventually. But probably not through this particular case here. Okay, so here are the charges, verses 5 and 6. Well, the other outcome, of course, will be he'll be released. That's what St. Paul is expecting. Nail-biting stuff. For we have found this man a plague, a creator of dissension among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He even tried to profane the temple, and we seized him and wanted to judge him according to our law. Okay, so those are the charges, and the reason why it is that they themselves arrested him, they're saying. So the first one is that he is a plague, a limon, a pest. Okay, like you are a pest, and therefore we want to kill you off. By Roman law, you could not be killed for being a pest, for being a plague. The word itself is rather good. You, sir, are a plague, a pestilence. So he's irritating them. And the second one, and this one, if proved, he could be executed for, but he is not stirring up dissension or insurrection against the Romans. He's simply stirring up dissension everywhere, they say, throughout the Jewish diaspora against Jewish teaching. So they think. Of course, he's not doing that at all. He's bringing their teaching to conclusion. So that is number two, stirring up dissension. And for that, he can be executed, but not because it's something about Jewish law. Romans, Jewish law. So what about Jewish law? We're not interested. And then thirdly, a ringleader of the Nazarene sect. Now, Nazarenes are, being called Nazarenes was an early name for Christians. And indeed, if you go to the Middle East nowadays, they will ask you also if you're a Nazarene. Are you a Christian? That means Christianos or Nazarene. And you'll find also that quite a number of people will have the Arabic letter, I'll draw it this way. Which way around will you be seeing it? This way around. It's an N. So it looks like a big U with a dot over the top of it. That is a Nu for Nazarene. And they have the the Wadi Nazarene, which are the Christian wadi. A wadi is a valley, usually with a dry riverbed at the bottom of it. So it's not always running with water. Sometimes it's running with water, but wadi is a sort of valley. And the Wadi Nazarene, or the Christian valley, Christian wadi, is an area of Syria, which is inhabited by Christians. And on their houses, often they'll have this N with the dot above it. Especially actually after ISIS, and quite a number of people who are Christians in that area of the world have had an N tattooed upon them to show that they are Christian, an N often with a cross above it, to show they're Christians. So in order so that if ISIS or Taliban or other people, whatever they morph into next, the new Syrian government maybe, if they want to come and find them, there they are. They can kill them off. They can become, the person with the newt on them can become a martyr, and the killer a murderer. Now that word there, a ringleader of the Nazarene sect, is quite interesting. Ringleader there, because it's what's called a harpax legomenon. I'm saying, and what is that? Miss Connie is saying, it's a little bit late to be telling me these sorts of things, Father Philip. God bless you. Right, a legomenon, harpax legomenon is a word which only appears in one place in the scriptures and nowhere else. Okay? So, and this one is one of those. The word itself is protostatin. Protostatin is somebody who is the first of those who are statin, that they are of the ranks, the first among the ranks. So first of the ranks, that's what it actually means in Greek. But you only find it in that one place. And we have no fewer than two of these, this particular reading. Now, that's quite exciting. You get one of them during the Lord's Prayer, which is, it means supersubstantial. Okay, hypousion, supersubstantial. And that only appears in the Lord's Prayer. And as a result, when you get a word like that, it's not certain exactly what it means. And in the Lord's Prayer, we simply don't translate it. We say, give us today our daily bread. We don't say, give us today our daily supersubstantial bread. Okay? To the muddlement of many evangelicals who thinks it means ordinary everyday bread. But there we go. And the same here. We get another harpax legomenon here. Protostatin, ringleader, first amongst the ranks. He's first amongst the ranks of those wretched Nazarenes. Ugh. You can hear them spitting that early name against the Christians. We, of course, then use for ourselves. Okay, so far so good. So, Miss Connie, you can relax again now. Go back to your nighttime drink. As you watch the sun going down, maybe it's already gone down. And then the next thing they accuse him of course, is profaning the temple, trying to profane the temple. And that, as we know, is a straightforward lie. This is not what St. Paul did. He did not try to profane the temple. He did not even take anybody into the temple. Though, of course, he did have someone who was a Gentile with him beforehand in and around Jerusalem, which would have sickened them anyway. But profaning the temple, he is certainly innocent of that. So of all of these things, the only thing that Felix might think might be something to try him over would be the fact that he was creating dissension because the Romans did not like anybody creating dissension at all. But the fact that he's only creating dissension about some matter of Jewish theology, who gives a damn, he'd say. I don't. And he'd have gone off to recurl his curly hair back into the rollers and carry on with his nice day, feathering his own nest. Now this verse and the next verse and a bit of the following one does not appear in all of the manuscripts. Okay, so we might as well read them, but you'll be interested to know. So from verse 6, where it says, "And wanted to judge him according to our law. But the commander Lysias came by, and with great violence took him out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come to you." That doesn't appear in the best manuscripts. I'm not quite sure why it is that the New King James Version has left it in. It's quite interesting because, of course, that is also a lie and may have been put in later on by somebody who knew that they had said this in order to emphasize the fact that the Jews have no case and that they are telling porcupines. Maybe I shouldn't say that. They're telling lies. Okay, they're not telling the truth. Okay, but anyway, let's have a look to see what it says. Want to judge him according to our law. Well, that wasn't legal for them to do anyway. But the commander, Lysias, came by, that is true so far, with great violence took him out of our hands. The violence, of course, is coming from the Jews who were kicking up dust, quite literally, and they were threatening to tear Paul apart and stone him. And Lysias came and rescued him out of them, commanding his accusers to come to you. Well, that takes us to where we are now. Okay? Verse 8, the rest of verse 8. By examining him yourself, you may ascertain all these things of which we accuse him. And the him there's some dissension about whether they need to, the him refers to Lysias or to St. Paul. I think most people come down on the idea that it's St. Paul, as St. Paul is there and Lysias is not. But the way that it's actually said in Greek, it could be either of those two. By examining Paul yourself, you may ascertain all these things of which we accuse Paul. Okay? In other words, you can judge for yourself, noble Felix. And the Jews also assented, maintaining that these things were so. Guess what? Verse 9. We've got another hypax legomenon. Da, da, da. And this word here is the word assented. Okay? Es sun epitithemi. Sin epitithemi. And that means to, well, we don't really know, but it has the word agree in that, and sun means together. They agreed together. So assent is quite a good translation of that. They agreed together, maintaining that these things are so. In other words, St. Luke is making it quite clear to us that from the high priest downwards, they're all of them prepared to lie through their teeth about St. Paul and trump up any old thing they could think of. We don't like the fact that he wears pink socks. Might have been thrown in there had they only thought of it. Or he eats fish on Fridays. Okay, so joined in the verbal attack. I think that's really the best way you can say. The Jews also say maintaining these things so. It is to do with an attack. They are deliberately verbally attacking Paul. They're assenting that these things are true. We have this another hapax legomenon, two in one short area, enough to give any decent person indigestion. And they're trying to translate these things. And there we're going to leave St. Paul standing before most noble Felix, wondering what he's going to say to them. Okay? So has anybody said anything that I need to talk about? Nope. Which leaves me only to say to you, you know that I asked you to pray for Andreas, who died, and I also asked you to pray for Dorcas. She has now had her baby, thank God, and it is another boy. I always like the way to say, people say, it's a little boy. As if the possibility might have been that she gave birth to a 25-year-old, or a fully formed teenager, or an elephant, or a piglet. Bless them all, they look like piglets to me, but there we go. If you could pray also particularly today for Nicholas, for whom we have been praying. We were told the other day that he only had a couple of hours to live. He must be made of very strong stuff. I've seen pictures of him when he was, well, only a couple of years ago. A very strapping, healthy, handsome man. And then I saw I was there on Monday when saw him in the video, and his breathing is now very poor. He's very relaxed, he's very calm, he knows that he's dying. The priest has been with him, and I think the best thing we can hope for is an easy, quiet, peaceful death, and a good defense before the great judgment seat of Christ. So if you could pray for them. Pray also for Nicoletta, who's joined us today, for the other Nicoletta in Romania, for Daniel, who continues to make headway, for Hilary, who is having chemotherapy, for whom we're praying at the moment. She should be feeling a bit better today, but will have more chemotherapy shortly. She's got 3 more sessions to go. Pray for Erin's Joseph and for Dino's Simon, for Christina, who presumably is packing her bags because she's arriving here on Saturday, which means that I need to say to the rest of you, why aren't you coming for Easter as well? You'd be very welcome. You might have to share rooms at this stage because both rooms are being used, but one of them we can have several men in if you like. Carol, who is the mother of Thekla, and for Georgia, who is Mariana's daughter here, for Jane, who is still alive and really, really appreciates your prayers. So thank you for that. And carry on praying, of course, for Ash Oza's sister, who's called Angie, okay, and for Hector as well. So please pray for them. And my suggestion again is you get out Josephus. You're probably, it's easy to find, very easy indeed to find second-hand copies of Josephus and the Jewish histories and the Roman wars against there. And as I say, they make a really good read. A second-hand copy will cost you next to nothing. Miss Connie, I know you're right down there. Hi, Miss Connie. And I know it's a long way away, but there we are. And Anton won't be seeing us this Easter either. That is very sad for us all here because we love Anton very much. I'll miss you. But there we are. I hope you have a very good time wherever you're going to go to. Anton is something of a one-man carbon footprint disaster. He's always jetting off to hot countries. No, I don't blame you, Anton. Have a good time. Hopefully you're not having to work all the way through Easter instead. Maybe one day you'll visit and you'll be very welcome. Off to Greece. Well, that's wonderful. You'll have to go and visit Christos. Okay, so be good. Please pray for those people. Thank God for the birth of this new little boy. Not an elephant or a fully formed teenager. I'm looking forward to meeting him in a few days. And pray that Dorcas makes a quick recovery from her birth giving. Okay, righto, God willing, all other things being equal, and I am still around, we will read to find out what happened to St. Paul and his side of the story. And then, God willing, on Thursday, we will finish off the chapter by discovering what Felix decides. Okay? Right, God bless you and keep you. If you like this, please feel free to put a thumbs up. If you didn't, then put a thumbs down. I don't care, one way or another, it gets more people watching them. And it'll be good to see, if you do want to come, I mean, you really are very welcome. Miss Connie, you go and chase away those naughty, hoppity things away from your cabbages, and have a great day. Okay, God bless you and keep you. Bye-bye then. Hoppity things, what are they called? Kangaroos. Okay, there we are. Bye-bye.